Looks like we've got two very American scenes, but very different. A Miami hotel room and the wilderness of Yosemite.
Yeah, I think I've won this time.
Yeah, you have, definitely.
There's worse places to be. I think we've both come out trumps in the news gathering lottery today.
Yeah, that's true. We have. No complaints, no complaints.
I'm Martha Kelner.
And I'm Mark Stone.
And this is day 31 of Trump 100. Later, we're going to be talking about the impact Elon Musk's federal cuts are having in the US national parks, like Yosemite, which is where I am right now.
But first, Donald Trump is in Florida, and so am I, because the headlines just keep on coming, including in the last few hours, stunning words from the president blaming Ukraine for starting its war with Russia and suggesting that President Zelenskyy is deeply unpopular at home and should hold elections if he wants peace.
It's been another roller coaster day, hasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly has. And so I've switched Washington, D.C. For a Miami beach. Donald Trump is just up the road in Mar-a-Lago, where he spent Tuesday afternoon signing more executive orders and speaking once again in a free-flowing way to the media. And that's where his comments on Ukraine came.
I'm interested in the fact that he's still down in Florida after the long President's Day weekend. Do you think we'll see him doing that a lot this term, Mark, using Mar-a-Lago as, in effect, a second White House? I've heard political strategists describing it as Washington, D.C. with palm trees.
Yeah, the Winter White House. Funnily enough, Mar-a-Lago used to be owned by a very wealthy American, Marjorie Post. When she died, left it to the state. And he hoped that it would become a winter White House. In the end, it didn't. It got sold to a property developer called Donald Trump. But then he became the president. And so in a roundabout way, it has actually become a winter White House.
But the big news in Mar-a-Lago, of course, all about Ukraine, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, huge news. The Ukraine story has dominated through the course of the weekend and culminated over the past 24 hours with the first round of peace talks, on the face of it at least, talks between the US and Russia. They ended on Tuesday morning, US time. Speaking after the talks finished, both sides seemed pretty pleased with the way things had gone. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, to quote him, "I have reason to believe that the American side has started to better understand our position." And his opposite number, the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Little Marco, as Donald Trump once called him, now his foreign secretary effectively, well, he said that he couldn't have imagined a better result from the talks in Riyadh.
I imagine not everyone quite as happy as the Russians and Marco Rubio today, though, Mark.
Yeah, but because I think, as we saw over the course of the weekend, the Ukrainians are being entirely left out of a process which impacts them directly. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy was not there in Riyadh at the talks, and he repeated his stance that no talks should take place, as he said, behind our backs. When asked about how he thinks the talks have gone, President Trump had this to say.
You know, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years. And a long time before that, this could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago, without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their side.
Yeah, look, remarkable as it may seem, Donald Trump's language there seems to firmly place himself on Russia's side. He suggested that if he'd been president when the war had started, he would have made a deal with Ukraine that would, quote, have given almost all their land back and no people would have been killed. But more than that, he made this extraordinary comment suggesting that it was Ukraine that started the war.
This goes beyond the normal anti-Ukraine talking points then, doesn't it, Mark? This is an attack directly on President Zelenskyy.
Yes, and he made other claims as well. He said that Zelenskyy's polling is very low. He said it was 4% and suggested that Zelenskyy should hold elections if he wants peace. Incidentally, the truth is that in recent polling in Ukraine, Zelenskyy's approval rating is actually at about 50%, not 4%. But to be honest, Martha, like stepping back, and I was thinking about it on the flight down here, a few days ago, I think one prevailing view was that President Trump was just being Trump, using incendiary language to pressure Europe to step up, to spend more on its own defense, to spend more on its own security. And these were kind of bargaining chip. We've heard it so many times before. And in fact, in his first presidency, he had remarkable success in getting Europe to spend more on its defense. But I think over the course of the weekend, people have actually been caught off guard and do believe that maybe Donald Trump is absolutely serious when he says that America no longer has Europe's back. There is clearly an objective to end the war in a way that will not benefit Ukraine, but will benefit Russia.
I know he's sort of the architect of the art of the deal, but this seems an odd way to go into negotiations, to almost sell Ukraine down the river before they've even begun. What is the incentive for Russia to offer anything in this?
Already, the Russians believe that, and we've talked to our colleague in Moscow, Ivor Bennett, about this, that they believe that they're doing well out of this. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, set down some red lines. He said no NATO troops are to be in Ukraine as peacekeepers. So, I mean, that raises the question, well, if not NATO troops, or even troops that are part of nations that belong to NATO, then who is going to do the peacekeeping? But as I say, I think Trump's objective here is to end things quickly, so that in 6 months, a year, maybe a bit longer, he can say, look what I've done. I've stopped the war in Ukraine. I've stopped the war in the Middle East. Short term, that may well be the case, but at what cost, I think, is the question that Europeans are asking themselves now with a huge amount of angst.
So it may play out well domestically, but internationally it could be the erosion of decades-long friendships and alliances.
Upending it, like literally over the course of the weekend, upending so many alliances. And we are finding now that European countries are trying to work out how to decouple themselves from their reliance on America, and to do it right now. Anyway, Martha, I want to know why you are in Yosemite. What a beautiful place.
It is. I feel very lucky to have come here in the course of work, because it's been on my bucket list of places to visit anyway. But yeah, we drove up here this morning, around a 5-hour drive north of LA. I know you've been before, right?
Yeah, I went last summer with my family, and it is stunning. It was described to me as kind of the Disneyland of national parks, because I mean, America's national parks are some of its greatest assets, but Yosemite is quite a lot more accessible than some of them. As you say, it's 5 hours from LA, it's much closer to San Francisco, and so it's easy to get to. So it gets quite busy, but it is absolutely stunning. We loved it.
Yeah, and gorgeous today, perfect bright blue skies, crisp weather. And you know, the national parks really do feel like the jewel in the crown of the United States. And on that note, we're here because I wanted to speak to people visiting the park, and to people who work or worked here, who have been affected by the job cuts. 1,000 people who were working within the National Park Service lost their jobs suddenly, told about it by email at the end of last week.
And like many parts of the federal government in recent week, the National Park Service have been on the receiving end of job cuts because of this perception that there's waste there, that there's flabbiness that needs to go.
Yeah, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, I'm sure, would say that there's huge overspending and inefficiency within the National Park Service. So there's been 1,000 job cuts made within the National Park Service. On top of that, the US Forest Service, which operates in a lot of the national parks, including in Yosemite, is firing around 3,400 people.
Yeah, it's all part of Donald Trump's push to cut federal spending. DOGE, the department heading all this up, says they're saving valuable taxpayer dollars that are otherwise being wasted. Over the weekend, the official DOGE X account tweeted a list of federal spending plans they've cancelled. And I found it interesting to look at some of the stuff they say they're just cancelling at the swipe of a pen. Here's a few. $19 million for biodiversity conservation in Nepal, $1.5 million for voter confidence in Liberia, and $14 million for social cohesion in Mali. I guess many people will question why that money is going to all those places. I suppose that the counter argument is that what these projects do, whether it be voter confidence in Liberia, social cohesion in Mali, is create stability in countries that would otherwise be unstable. and then therefore could be a problem down the line. But Donald Trump says it is about priorities, American priorities that are not in places like Nepal, Liberia, or Mali. But you might think that the American priorities are in places like Yosemite, Martha.
Yeah, I think as headlines, those read particularly well to American voters. They will say, wait a minute, I don't want to be paying 40% of my paycheck to improve voter confidence in Liberia and social cohesion in Mali. But I think these job cuts that are hitting the national parks, I think those really do irk people. And in fact, I was speaking to one gentleman here who is a very enthusiastic Trump voter. He said there's huge amounts of waste, but even he was saying, oh, I think they should have left the national parks alone.
No, I think they're looking for government waste, and so I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If you're not from here, then you don't know how much waste there is going on within our government, and our tax dollars are spent without our knowledge. So. Yeah, I'm all for what he's doing, what Elon Musk is doing. I'm supportive. We'll see. Agencies like the National Park Service, state parks, and that kind of thing. To me, I think those should be last.
Yeah.
There's a lot of agencies I think they should focus on first.
So I think these will be controversial, but certainly for the 200,000 federal workers across the country who have lost their jobs, the last few weeks have been devastating. Those are people like Oleg, who until Friday worked as a plumber here in Yosemite.
I think as federal workers, a lot of us do want to see reforms in the government in certain ways. We've seen lack of accountability in certain ways. We've seen our budget kind of be mishandled and money going in certain places. We're like, okay, that's weird. But we just want to say that this isn't the way to do it. This isn't the way, because this has been so scatterbrained. So many people are getting let go from different divisions, and there's no rhyme or reason to who gets cut and who doesn't.
This is a big part of American life. 300 million visitors each year to the national parks, according to their own data. People from all around the world come to see the incredible nature, like here in Yosemite. But the Park Service is warning that visitors may now have, reduced opening hours, and facilities like toilets, like visitor centres, that they may be closed because they're not going to be enough people to staff them.
Well, I can certainly attest to the fact that the queues, the lines, as they call them, in some of these national parks are vast. So if they're going to get worse, then that's not going to be a good thing at all. But anyway, we've seen this approach across federal government, firing en masse, as you say, not audits, but just wiping things out. And we're starting to see federal employees bringing lawsuits against DOJ.
Yeah, I actually spoke earlier on to a lawyer, Shannon Reardon, who represents over 2,000 employees fired from Twitter, which is, of course, now X. After Elon Musk took over the app in 2022, she offered an interesting insight into what she says is Elon Musk's slash and burn playbook when it comes to getting rid of people.
And we're losing people who have devoted their careers to these jobs and to these agencies. So we are losing people who have so much expertise and experience. Government employees who are not high-level policymakers, their political affiliation is not supposed to be relevant to their jobs. So there is this real concern out there that this is all serving the purpose of trying to replace much of the federal workforce with those who are loyal to Trump and the so-called MAGA movement, and what this is going to do to the workings of the federal government going forward, I have no idea.
Shannon also talked to me about how once they had laid off more than half of their workforce, X realised that they'd fired some vital employees and tried to hire them back. Well, it seems like something similar to that is happening at the USDA, which is the Agriculture Department, where it seems some employees who were working on the bird flu outbreak that's ongoing here in the States, they're now trying to hire them back because they realise that they are in fact essential.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, we were talking earlier in the context of Ukraine about quick fixes, about getting things done quickly, making the headlines look good very quickly. I've got peace in the Middle East, I've got peace in Ukraine. you can almost apply the same principle to what we're seeing here. Is he can say very quickly, look, I've cut this much flab out of the federal government. I've saved this much money. But what is the consequence of a deal on Ukraine or the Middle East, buying Gaza? Or what is the consequence of cutting so many jobs in sectors like the National Park Service? I think it will take time for people to see the impact. And by that time, that stage, it could be too late. It's what we were discussing the other day about the difference between a calculated and careful audit and just wiping things out wholesale. Anyway, there's a lot going on today, so we'll rattle through a few other things. I was interested by the news that the CIA has been flying spy drones over Mexico to keep a tab on drug cartels, and the Mexican president has kind of downplayed and shrugged off the presence of the drones, calling it a little campaign, and she refused to say anything else. I think she is suggesting that it's all part of some headline generating efforts by Donald Trump to make it look like he's doing something when actually he won't. I'm not sure. I agree. I think it's perfectly possible that we could see the American military targeting drug cartels in the jungles of northern Mexico in time.
Yeah, and it's almost been swallowed up in all the news today. But Donald Trump delivered on one of his campaign promises, or he almost delivered on one of his campaign promises. He signed an executive order aimed at making IVF more affordable. He had promised to make it free during the 2024 election campaign. Nevertheless, this is going to be welcomed by many Americans who want to try IVF but can't afford it. It's also part of a bigger pro-family element, which is Trump's vision for America, which will make part of his MAGA base very happy, though it does risk alienating some evangelical Christian supporters who oppose IVF.
And we must mention something that's just come in as we've been recording, a Truth Social post, a tweet, retweeted in fact, or re-xed, whatever you want to say, from Donald Trump, which he's announcing, and I'll read it to you. Over the past 4 years, the Department of Justice has been politicized like never before. Therefore, I am instructing the termination of all remaining Biden-era US attorneys. We must clean house immediately and restore confidence. America's golden age must have a fair justice system that begins today. In short, he seems to be suggesting that he will remove all Biden-era US attorneys. I mean, that's remarkable.
Yeah. Continues to deliver the news, doesn't he, Donald Trump?
Yeah, really does. So tomorrow we'll have more from Miami. The reason I'm here is because there's a massive Saudi investment conference here in Miami Beach. Donald Trump, we know he's close to the Saudis. We know he'd like them to invest up to $1 trillion in the United States, and he will be speaking here in the hours ahead at the conference. So we'll have all that for you in the day ahead.
But that's it for today. Remember, though, you can send us your thoughts, questions, or praise on Trump100@sky.uk.
Criticism too. We take all constructive criticism, but as always, we'd love to hear from you. Trump100, follow it wherever you're listening, and you can also find us on YouTube. Just search Trump100.
Thanks for joining us for day 31 of Trump 100. See you tomorrow for day 32.
See you then. Bye-bye.